All right, let's get right into it. For decades now, there's been this fierce, high-stakes debate, a war, really, raging in our schools. And it's all about the single most fundamental skill we teach our kids, how to read. Now, this isn't just some academic squabble. As you're about to see, how this war plays out has massive consequences for equity and justice in our country. It all kind of starts with a question you've probably heard before, maybe even ask yourself. We all know about the summer slide, right? That idea that kids just lose a big chunk of what they learned during that long summer break. And it seems pretty simple. The problem is just too much vacation. But what if I told you that's completely the wrong question to be asking? That the summer slide isn't the actual disease, it's just a symptom of a much, much deeper problem that's happening all year long in the classroom. So, let's start our investigation right there with this summer slide mystery. We're going to treat it less like the problem itself and more like our very first clue. Okay, so here's what the data tells us. The summer slide does not hit all kids equally. Not even close. It hits low-income students the hardest, basically acting as a multiplier for the achievement gap that's already there. So while some kids are treading water or even gaining skills, other kids are falling further and further behind every single summer. And this, right here, gets to the absolute heart of the issue. The kids who slide the most are the ones who never really truly mastered the basics in the first place. You see, they never made that all-important leap from the hard work of learning to read to the absolute magic of reading to learn. Their skills were just so fragile that without a teacher there every day, they just crumbled. So to figure out why those skills are so fragile for so many kids, we've got to look at the science of the brain itself. And this is where we find the next huge piece of the puzzle. Now this right here, this flips a huge assumption most of us have. We tend to think that learning to read is just like learning to talk. Well, it's not. Not at all. Speaking is natural. It's a biological process that our brains are literally hardwired for. But reading is a human invention. It's only a few thousand years old. To read, our brain has to actually repurpose bits and pieces that evolved for totally different jobs. It has to be taught explicitly. And what is the main thing that needs to be taught? It's this, the alphabetic principle. This is the master key to everything. It's the simple, but really not so obvious, idea that all these little squiggles on a page represent the sounds of our spoken language. You can't just pick this up by being around books. Someone has to teach it to you, step by step. In fact, cognitive scientists have boiled this all down to a really elegant little formula. They call it the simple view of reading. And it goes like this. Reading comprehension equals decoding times language comprehension. Let's break down how this actually works, because it's pretty powerful. Notice the formula uses a multiplication sign, not an addition sign. And that is the whole ball game. If a child has amazing language skills, but they can't decode the words on the page, which is what you often see with dyslexia, their comprehension gets totally crushed. If either D or LC is at 0, guess what? Reading comprehension is 0. You need both, period. This is a great way to picture it. Scarborough's reading rope. Think of those lower strands as all the decoding work. The goal is to get so good at it that it becomes totally automatic, something you don't even think about. And once that happens, it frees up all this mental energy, all your brain power, to work on the upper strands. Things like vocabulary, background knowledge, and, what the text actually means. If that lower rope is weak, the whole thing just falls apart. Okay, so if the science is this clear, why on earth are so many kids still struggling? Well, that brings us right into the middle of the battlefield, the war over how we should be teaching kids to figure out what the words are. On this slide, you can see the two totally opposite battle plans. On one side, you've got approaches like whole language and balanced literacy. Here, kids are taught to use clues. Look at the picture, think about the story, to basically guess the word. But on the other side, the science of reading says no. The main strategy has to be decoding, sounding the word out using the letters. I mean, it's a huge disagreement. When a kid gets stuck, should they look away from the word to the picture, or should they look closer at the letters? So let's line up the main suspects here. You've got whole language, which basically thinks reading just happens naturally. Then there's balanced literacy, and this has been the dominant method for decades. It tried to split the difference, but the phonics it included was often kind of random and not very systematic. And then there's structured literacy, which is the science put into practice. It demands that phonics be taught explicitly, systematically, one step at a time. And, well, that last row, the one on research support, it tells you pretty much everything you need to know. And listen, this isn't new information. This was all confirmed more than 20 years ago.
The huge National Reading Panel report sifted through mountains of research and came back with a crystal clear verdict. Systematic phonics isn't just an option, it is a significantly more effective way to teach reading. Scientifically speaking, the debate was over.
But the war kept on going in classrooms. And this is where our investigation leads to its most devastating conclusion. This whole thing isn't just about teaching methods. It's a story about deep, systemic inequity. Let this number sink in for a second. 95%. Cognitive scientists estimate that with the right evidence-based instruction, 95% of all children can learn to read. Reading failure for the vast majority of kids is not inevitable. It's preventable. Now, here's the terrifying flip side of that. A child who is struggling to read at the end of first grade has a 90% chance of still being a poor reader in the fourth grade. That window to build a solid foundation is incredibly small, and the consequences of missing it last a lifetime. So, where has this left us as a country? It's left us with this. Nearly 70%, two-thirds of our students are reading below a proficient level. Now, when you put that number next to the 95% of kids who could learn to read, you realize this isn't a student failure. It's a massive, systemic, instructional failure. And the stakes here are just astronomical. When kids can't read by third grade, they get frustrated, they disengage, and that leads to higher rates of behavior problems, dropping out, and tragically, there is a very real, documented link to the criminal justice system. Failing to teach a child to read can literally alter the entire trajectory of their life. But there is some good news. After decades of parents and scientists and educators shouting from the rooftops, a change is finally starting to happen. We are right in the middle of a huge national reading reset. All across the country, states are actually passing new laws to force instruction to line up with the science. They're mandating better curricula, they're requiring new training for teachers, and, this is a big one, they are banning the 3 cueing system. They are literally making it illegal to teach kids that guessing is the primary way to read a word. And the approach that's being put in its place is structured literacy. It's a framework that makes sure reading is taught the way our brains actually learn it, step by step, systematically, and very explicitly. But look, this is a monumental task. We're talking about retraining hundreds of thousands of teachers and undoing generations of practices that we now know just don't work for most kids. Which really leaves us with one final critical question. The science is settled. We know how to teach 95% of children how to read. The laws are finally starting to change, but is the will actually there, from the state government to the universities that train teachers, down to every single elementary school classroom to see this through, to finally make sure that literacy isn't a privilege but a right for every single child? The answer to that question is going to define an entire generation.